Hello and welcome to the webinar. My name is Lyle Dixon-Smith. I'm the SVP, Business Development at Procurement IQ. Today I'm going to touch on the benefits of using external market intelligence for corporate procurement spend or indirect spend, and how using market intelligence can assist with overcoming some internal challenges and add value. So we're briefly going to touch on some of the roles market intelligence can have in procurement, such as building relationships between procurement and internal customers, which is the overarching theme for today, or how MI can add value to stakeholders and their business units, the direct benefits it brings to the procurement function itself, and the different types of market intelligence and ways it can be delivered that impact building or maintaining those relationships. So building relationships with stakeholders to a point where procurement is seen as a valuable business partner is a long and often tough road. Even with top-down mandates in place, for example, and existing mindsets, the culture of the prospect of change, and this can be quite an obstacle. But fortunately, the use of both internal data analytics and external market intelligence in business has changed the way that companies operate, achieve success, and ultimately provide that long-term strategic direction. Now, the use of relevant internal data combined with things like the external market analysis that we're going to be talking about today has led to efficiencies, savings, innovation, and ultimately helped to solidify bonds between procurement functions and business units. Now, the use of MI provides direct benefits to the procurement function, but it also creates advantages for the internal customers and business units. And ultimately, that knock-on effect is the overall value it brings to the entire organization. For example, my clients around the world provide feedback that valuable interactions with their internal stakeholders are often driven by being able to access market intelligence very quickly, and in those business units in turn value that quick response to their queries. This directly has an impact on the confidence that business units have in procurement teams. So procurement is looking to drive efficiencies, not slow things down, and all the while improving the quality of the interactions and delivering the results for their customers. Valuable market insights provided swiftly improve efficiencies, such as sourcing lead times, for example, in some instances reported by clients as much as 50 to 70%. Now, the application of market intelligence in this way can help to change the view of procurement from a complex additional step to more of an enabler. The capability of procurement to handle internal requests quickly with relevant knowledge allows for business units to spend more time focusing on the top line activities and department key goals, while leaving most of the heavy lifting to the procurement partner. When we talk about the benefits for procurement itself, the introduction of MI to procurement functions supports a number of key activities for that department and also has some fairly tangible benefits. Looking at a variety of examples, it supports the creation of subject matter experts, but it also allows for procurement teams to gain benchmarks from external sources that aren't directly from suppliers themselves or have any bias in the marketplace, and gain new insights or unique perspectives. Often, my clients will come back and talk to me about those unique or fresh perspectives from other points of view that often drive that additional value. And the application of external market intelligence from credible third-party providers helps procurement officials to engage with stakeholders and lead them to be seen as a strategic business enabler and promote the formation of strategic alliances. One of the ongoing issues that I talk about and often faced by corporate procurement is the number of sourcing projects, the constant deadlines, and multitude of categories covered every month and year. So clients admit to me often that in many instances there's little time to compile enough market intelligence to support decisions or recommendations, whatever you want to call them, in the way that they would like. And having an outsourced third-party provider, or a number of them, means that they can rely on additional credible factual evidence to support those internal recommendations without having to actually spend wasted hours pulling data from hundreds of sources themselves and then fact-checking those sources, when in fact that's already available these days at the touch of a button. And the use of trusted market intelligence tools provides a comprehensive understanding of market levers that lead to stronger negotiation positions and help formulate things like go-to-market strategies, especially early on in the procurement process. And all this ultimately adds value to the entire business, whether it be identified savings or confidence their business obtain the right service or product for a fair price. Now, the opportunity to add value throughout the procurement process and to business units through MI is undeniable. I mean, countless white papers and case studies will attest to that. However, market intelligence is only useful when the appropriate type of information delivered in an appropriate way is applied at each stage of the procurement process. So what do I mean by this? Well, I think it's well recognized that no intelligence provider offers all of the insight required. So obviously, that's a challenge in itself, but knowing what problem you're trying to solve first, or what the main objectives are that you're looking to achieve, should at least help point in the right direction. And gaining an understanding of who those vendors are and what they provide will also help to provide some direction of where to go. Now, whether the focus, for example, is on vendor consolidation or contract best practices, or building broad category strategies, or just simply trying to build alliances to be seen as a value-added service to your internal business units, it's important to know the categories of market intelligence that are available and also how they can be delivered and applied along the way. So what I'm going to do is just talk very briefly about some types of market intelligence, what is actually out there. And I think one of the key things to think about is breaking it down into four sort of sectors or four categories. So one is supply market intelligence. I think we're all familiar with that. It includes things like Porter's Five Forces, that sort of SWOT pest analysis, things like market structure, consolidation, market share, who those key players are, external demand drivers, things like technology changes. There's a whole variety of things in there as well. And the other one is contract terms and conditions. That may not typically be seen as market intelligence, but it really is, because understanding best practice and what are the most important terms and conditions or clauses for each category and subcategory being sourced is valuable insight, especially if you haven't put together a contract for a specific product or service before. And what about supplier-specific information? What are the specific capabilities and can certain providers execute on what they've promised? What is their financial health and what are the risks are inherent to that business? And the other one is pretty simple, and it's cost structure and commercial. What does it cost a business to produce that product? What are the margins on delivering that good or service? What is the breakdown of their internal costs, and how do they typically charge for this? What is their cost model specifically? So that you can understand what you should be expected to pay based on a number of variables, and who's going to be able to provide you a competitive price point. So all these four things together combine a really holistic point of view when it comes to market intelligence. But if your aim in your organization is to deliver multiple broader category strategies as a foundation to where you want to move to, supply market intelligence is key and very important to help build out those strategies, but also while being used collaboratively with business units to add that much needed insight. And ultimately, I think I mentioned earlier, that holistic point of view, internal needs, requirements, as well as understanding the external marketplace. Now, let's say, for example, that's where you're at. At that stage, contract terms and conditions may not be the focus, and therefore unnecessary in that step of the process. In fact, if you're building up multiple broader category strategies, it could be that way for years, until at least procurement evolves to wrap its head around broader strategies and then moves on to the next phase in achieving contract best practices. And that could change the focus on the type of external intelligence required, or potentially the vendor or supplier that you're looking at. Now, strangely enough, this may not be something that's relatively thought about often, but it's equally important is the content delivery. And it's so simple, yet its impacts can be pretty far-reaching. So you've got to ask yourself the question, not only is how can my content be delivered, but how is it currently being delivered? And is it meeting the needs of not just my internal function, but also the needs of my internal customers? So the other way of thinking about it is, is my information actually being delivered immediately? So does it take days, weeks? And how does that influence how quickly my team can deal with helping to scope and define projects or engage with customers, and in a knowledgeable way, especially if they're not familiar with that product or service? Is your information available online? Is it through a portal? Is that content easy to interact with? Is the interface user-friendly? What about the format? Is the format consistent or inconsistent, making searching for the relevant information still a little challenging? And can it be aligned to more of a step process? And what about integration? Are you at that stage where digitization is a major part of your organization? And therefore, can that data then be integrated with existing internal platforms so that it arrives alongside that internal data, allowing the user of the information to see both in the rear view mirror and through the car windshield at the same time, for an even more holistic approach to a sourcing event that's based on historical data and external market factors. So let's just think about an example, and it comes to mind. I recall a large Fortune 500 company contracting an ad hoc provider that did on-demand research. Their internal customers, however, wanted short turnaround times to begin scoping projects within days, not weeks. Now, the fact that MI was not delivered quickly posed an internal challenge, which impacted the way the business units considered their procurement function and ultimately affected the relationship over a number of months. Now, to plug that gap, they used an off-the-shelf solution, which led to significantly improved turnaround times and helped change the perception of procurement by many business units at that time in their evolution. So over the course of the first 6 months, the procurement department also promoted that new MI tool by sharing with stakeholders and suggesting that coming to them first may save them many hours of unnecessary search and selection prior to involving procurement. So sticking with that story, just for a moment, two things happened here. One was the focus on supply market intelligence to engage with stakeholders, and at the speed at which the content was delivered. That became a significant part, ultimately, of applying that MI resource to their internal customer needs and process. So let's just look at this from a summarized perspective. This page should highlight a few things to consider when thinking about using MI to support internal goals or overcome certain challenges, whatever they may be. So from a value for stakeholders perspective, do your stakeholders, through the use of market intelligence in your department, gain from a value-added consultative approach? So where they believe that procurement can do most of the heavy lifting, and that ultimately giving that business more time to focus on top-line activities, but also while benefiting from increased speed to market and the implementation of those products and services that your internal customer needs quicker as a result of the use of it. What about the benefits specifically for procurement? Do business units perceive your department as a valued partner because it provides additional factual evidence and quickly to help build strategies or support recommendations, but through a better understanding of market levers and factors, not just your internal data and what their needs are, that position your team as an even stronger negotiator on behalf of their customer. And the other is the types of delivery of content. I think we just covered that off pretty recently, but it's important to understand the problems and goals you want your MI to help you achieve or solve, and then make a choice which of the four main types of market intelligence is appropriate at that time. For example, supply market intelligence for building those broader category strategies, if you're at that stage. And then the third one is just to ensure that the delivery method of market intelligence supports stakeholders' needs and expectations of procurement, not just the procurement function needs. For example, quicker turnaround times when responding to business units. Well, that's all I have for you today, but I want to thank you for taking the time to listen, and I hope that it's been useful. And if you'd like to speak with me or any of my colleagues or anything like that, please feel free to reach out. And here's a email address to either reach out to, or you could go to info@procurementiq.com. Thanks very much for your time today.